You're listening to a podcast by the Perennial Leader Project. I went to the woods because I wished to live deliberately, to front only the essential facts of life, and see if I could not learn what it had to teach, and not, when I came to die, discover that I had not lived. In this episode of In Search of Wisdom, I discuss a few selected passages like this one from the American essayist and philosopher Henry David Thoreau's classic work, Walden. As the year ends, Thoreau's wisdom offers much-needed reflection and insight into what it means to live deliberately. I hope you find something useful for daily life in this one. You can expect another episode around the new year where I'll share a few changes we're making to the podcast. All right, without any further delay, here is Thoreau on living deliberately. Thoreau wrote his classic work Walden while living alone in the woods. He built himself a small cabin near Walden Pond in Concord, Massachusetts. Thoreau famously wrote, "The mass of men lead lives of quiet desperation." You might say his venture into the woods was an attempt to avoid this fate. As he put it, "I wish to live deliberately, to front only the essential facts of life." Thoreau called public opinion a weak tyrant compared to our own thinking. What we think of ourselves is what determines, or rather indicates, our fate. You might say the first lesson we take from Thoreau is thinking for oneself. Thoreau explained that no way of thinking or doing, however ancient, can be trusted without proof. What everybody echoes as true today may turn out to be falsehood tomorrow, mere smoke of opinion. We should live our lives by 1,000 simple tests. He observed that the greater part of what my neighbors call, quote, good, I believe in my soul to be bad. Thoreau urges us to think for ourselves and reflect on what we deem to be good or bad in our souls. He quotes Confucius by writing, "To know that we know what we know, and that we do not know what we do not know, that is true knowledge." The idea of knowledge is worth contemplating. What is it that you know? Or, similarly, what is it that you don't know? It's easy for us to believe that we know things that we actually don't. You might recall the story of Socrates, who was proclaimed by the oracle as the wisest in Athens. He went around to investigate, asking the wisest people he could find all sorts of questions. Surprisingly, he discovered that many of the people he had conversations with believed they knew things that they didn't, and that he might actually be the wisest simply for the fact that he knew he didn't know. When we begin deliberately thinking for ourselves, we can question our assumptions, or, put another way, unravel and let go of some of the ideas that are not our own, or ideas that might be hindering our lives. One of those ideas could be around simplicity. Thoreau's call to live deliberately is a life of simplicity. He observed that our lives are frittered away by detail. Simplicity, 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 he urged. Thoreau suggested we let our affairs be 2 or 3, not 100 or 1,000. Instead of 3 meals a day, if it is necessary, eat but 1. Instead of 100 dishes, 5, and reduce other things in proportion. Thoreau noted, most of the luxuries and many of the so-called comforts of life are not only indispensable, but also positive hindrances to the elevation of mankind. Concerning luxuries and comforts, the wisest and most powerful who have ever lived a simpler and more meager life than the poor. His plea for simplicity is similar to that of the Greek philosopher Epicurus, who said, "He who is not satisfied with little is satisfied with nothing." And the last lesson that we'll take from Thoreau in this episode is know where you're headed. Living deliberately requires us to have clarity about the direction for our lives. Thoreau believed that we only hit what we aim at. Therefore, it's vital that we aim at something high. He remarked that with a little more deliberation in the choice of their pursuits, we would perhaps all become students and observers of ourselves and of our lives. Although Thoreau went to the woods to, quote, live deliberately, he ultimately left the woods. In his words, "I left the woods for as good a reason as I went there. Perhaps it seemed to me that I had several more lives to live and could not spare any more time for that one." It is remarkable how easily and insensibly we fall into a particular route and make a beaten track for ourselves. As we've discussed many times on the podcast and newsletter, we are creatures of habit. Therefore, we're wise to investigate those habits often, to ask ourselves again and again, how do I want to live my life? To conclude, I leave you with this short passage from Thoreau. "I learned this at least by my experiment. If one advances confidently in the direction of his dreams and endeavors to live the life he has imagined, he will meet with a success unexpected in common hours." Thank you for listening to another episode of the In Search of Wisdom podcast. I hope you found something useful for daily life. If so, I encourage you to put what you heard into practice. If you're interested in more tools for the art of living, consider subscribing to Perennial Meditations on Substack. By becoming a member, you'll help support the project and gain access to our podcasts, meditations, and courses. Until next time, be wise and be well.